In 2004, the FBI conducted a massive excavation on the outskirts of New York City. They were searching for the victims of a triple mafia murder. What they discovered lifted the lid on the world of real-life Sopranos. Ultimately, a mafia family would be crippled and a ruthless mobster brought down. Through the testimony of the forensic team that searched for the bodies and the undercover FBI agent who infiltrated the mob, the inner workings of the American mafia can be revealed, digging up secrets in a gangland graveyard. In late spring of 1981, two kids playing on a patch of waste ground in Queens, New York, made a grisly discovery. They had stumbled upon the decomposing body of Sonny Red Indelicado, a mobster who had gone missing just 3 weeks before. Rumor had it that he and two other gangsters had been murdered in a bloody power struggle within the Bonanno crime family, one of 5 Italian families that ran the New York Mafia.
This was huge. 3 major players in a crime family blown away all at the same time. And for more than 20 years, it was a secret. Nobody knew how it happened, where it happened, or any of the real details of how this caper was pulled off.
By 2004, the FBI had been trying to close the book on the triple murders for years. From the start, the prime suspect in the killings had been Joseph Massino, then a mid-level mobster who was destined to become the boss of the Bonannos. Massino and the FBI were to play a game of cat and mouse for decades.
That's what we're talking about.
Only now can the full story be revealed, using the FBI excavation, chilling trial testimony, and vivid memories of an undercover agent.
I always thought every day, you know, I'm going to get killed as a gangster and not as an FBI agent. What a hell of a way to go.
In 2004, FBI agents trained in crime scene investigation gathered at their headquarters as they would at the beginning of any mission. They were headed to the site in Queens, New York, on the outskirts of New York City, where 23 years earlier, the children had found Sonny Red's corpse. From a distance, the media documented the scene as the FBI began its excavation.
We were working probably 13, 14-hour days. The 3rd or 4th day, we found some kind of bone that ended up being a dog that had died there many years ago.
Strangely enough, the dog bones did suggest there was a connection between the site and the mob. Mobsters would gather at waste grounds for socializing and gambling on illegal dogfights. And in the late 1970s, Joe Massino may have used such settings to hang out with his mob friends when he was just starting his rise within the Bonanno family. At the dig, FBI agents were after human remains that might connect back directly to the triple murders and resolve the case against Massino. The excavation was the last chapter in the FBI's pursuit of the Bonanno crime family. It's a story that began with one man who infiltrated the Mafia family before the triple murders ever happened. FBI agent Joe Pistone, perhaps better known by his undercover name, Donnie Brasco, was inside the Bonannos at a time of great unrest.
The danger level was pretty high because of the fact that there was a war going on within the Bonanno family for control of the family.
When Pistone began infiltrating the mob in 1976, very little was known about the actual workings of the Mafia families, how they were organized, how decisions were made, and who the real players were.
My goal for infiltrating was basically to gather as much evidence and much intelligence about the Bonanno family and then ultimately about the mob as I could. All the illegal activities that the family was doing, the positions, who were the captains, who had the power in the family.
This was not a job for the faint-hearted.
It's a violent group, so you can't be worried about whether you're going to come out of it in one piece or you're going to come out of it alive. It's just something that you do.
What he did was assume the role of a fictitious jewel thief from Florida named Donnie Brasco.
And the reason I was a jewel thief is because it's basically not associated with violence. You know, not too many jewel thieves in jail for murder. And one thing you have to remember, the mob is not an equal opportunity employer. You have to be white, male, and Italian to be a member of the American Mafia. And you have to show that you have a good ability to make money illegally.
Pistone used jewelry confiscated by the FBI to prove his worth to his mob connections. Eventually, Pistone became what's called an associate of the mob. The next level, that of a soldier, would bring him into closer contact with the upper echelons of the family, including the triple murder suspects.
You're a soldier, you're a wise guy, you're a good fellow, you're straightened out, you're a button man. These are all, you know, all these terms mean the same thing. Your guy has been officially indoctrinated into any particular mafia family.
Pistone was hoping to get his chance with the Bonannos. But in order to become a true soldier, he would have to perform one task that was required of all low-level mobsters: commit murder. Only then would he become a made man.
You don't join the mafia if you're not willing to do bad things to people. You know, one of the requirements, you got to make your bones, you got to kill somebody.
By early 1981, it appeared that Pistone would finally get his chance. Massino's faction was, in fact, thinking of including Pistone in a takeover bid. He was supposed to be in on the triple murders themselves, the corpses now hidden in the gangland graveyard. In the spring of 1981, mobster Joe Massino organized a triple murder that wiped out his rivals for control of the Bonanno crime family. It was a ruthless move that boldly started his push for power. But even with an undercover FBI agent pursuing him from within, many years later the FBI was still digging for answers to close a case that had baffled them for decades. After clearing tons of rubbish, the FBI were finally getting to where the bones were buried. But they hit a snag.
At about 4 feet, the groundwater started to come in. And we were digging deep. We were trying to pump out the water at the same time. And when the water was pretty low in the hole, we actually had people going in, basically just breaking through the water and the mud with their hands to see if they could find anything.
Agent Ostrobinski worried that her team would miss evidence the water hadn't already washed away.
There was only probably 1 or 2 agents in the hole because you're almost dealing with like quicksand. On the 8th day, it's very muddy. We're in a big giant hole. We have people going through the hole on their hands and knees through the water and through the mud, and we finally find our first bone.
Their first human bone. Although there was no immediate direct connection to the triple murders, the find gave the team hope.
As soon as we found that, we knew we had our spot, and everybody was back in it. We were ready to go again.
But despite their restored enthusiasm, the site did not give up its ghosts easily. The mud made sifting for smaller bone fragments nearly impossible as agents searched for evidence of murder.
We just were taking the mud and trying to squeeze it through the sifting screens that we had. That just wasn't working. So what we developed was a water sifting operation. We took the fire hydrant that we had at the scene and we used that as our water supply, and we would dump dirt onto our sifting screens and then basically wash it through. You basically have to adapt as you go. You have to think of innovative ideas. You have to think outside the box, and that's what we did in this case. And from there, everything else started coming. And that's when we really focused in on getting that area dug out as much as we could and then sifting through everything in that area.
One of the major discoveries came straight out of a mound of mud. Investigators hoped this find would provide forensic evidence that would tie the newly discovered bones directly to the 1981 triple murders. A gunshot wound can leave a telltale signature in the bone. Even after 20 years of decomposition, forensic experts should be able to decipher the signs. They can study how a gunshot damages a skull by firing into a head of an animal carcass and then examining the damage. Dr. Al Harper, a forensic anthropologist who trains FBI evidence response agents, examines and x-rays the skull.
What we're looking at is the entry hole of a bullet and the powder burn around it. You can feel a fracture that runs from the bullet hole towards the occipital or back area of the skull.
The damage to the skull goes far beyond the entry wound and the path of the bullet itself.
As the bullet enters the brain, the tremendous force of the bullet has to be dissipated someplace. And this area, you can see that's where the bullet hole entered. Maybe looking at a fracture line along here. The brain itself absorbs most of this energy and expands and forces the fractures apart. And so we get a fracture like we see in the sheep where the bone is literally blown away from the brain.
While an analysis was begun on the human skull, office for DNA analysis.
Hey.
The process is always a careful and slow one, but if enough DNA could be extracted from the decomposing material, it would lead to a positive identification of the remains. And if the gangland graveyard bodies proved to be those of the missing men from 1981, they would finally give the FBI the forensic evidence necessary to close the book on the triple murders. When the hits first went down and the men disappeared without a trace, there was no physical evidence, just Pistone. Pistone was getting close to the action. To infiltrate any mafia family involved developing personal relationships with the mob, the intelligence being gathered by undercover agent Joe Bisters themselves. Pistone needed men in the Bonanno crime family to trust him, and by the time of the triple murders, an important member called Sonny Black had already befriended him and brought him into the family.
This was the Motion Lounge in 1979, 1980s, and this was the headquarters of the Sonny Black Napolitano faction of the crime family. This is where they hung out, they did all their business here. This is where Donnie Brasco, Joe Pistone, kind of infiltrated and became close to Sonny Black.
At the time, Sonny Black had no idea who Pistone really was. But 20 years later, as the undercover agent returned to his old haunts, he was still recognized and reviled by old mafia friends.
Here's the Motion Lounge. Now it's the San Giuseppe Club.
What was that?
Somebody called us an effing rat. So I guess we still tick them off out here. Sonny was a tough guy. But he had another side, too, that you didn't mind being with him, hanging out.
But he was a ruthless mobster. And by early 1981, he was deeply involved with Joe Massino in a plot to get rid of their competition within the Bonanno family.
Having discussions, you talk about anything with Sonny. He wasn't a 24-hour-a-day wise guy, you know?
The men who had to go were all captains in their own right. Sonny read Indelicado. Big Trin Chinchera, and Phil Lucky Jacone. And on May the 5th, 1981, they vanished.
These guys were three high-profile guys in the Bonanno family. It's no big secret when somebody goes missing, you know. If he doesn't show up in a couple days, you know he's whacked.
Just days after the hits, Pistone was called in for a meeting with his captain, Sonny Black.
And he tells me those guys are gone. So I know who he's talking about, you know. Nobody mentions names. Those guys are gone. And I knew there was the opposition, who the opposition was.
Black never named the victims, but did make it clear that both he and Messina were involved in the hits.
I mean, this is what I was told, all right? I mean, I wasn't there when they did this, but I was told it was Joey Messina's responsibility to get rid of Sonny Red. That was his responsibility. And I don't know whose responsibility it was to get rid of Big Trin and Phil Luck.
Grew up was in the burial of Sonny Red's body in too shallow a grave. Only 19 days after the triple murders, his corpse unexpectedly reappeared as two children came across the body.
But it was Joey's responsibility to get rid of Sonny Red. Well, there was a screw-up on Joey Messina's part, sure.
3 weeks after the killings, Sonny Red's body is out of the ground. There's real hard evidence that the murders went down.
It did not take long for the police to figure out whose body it was. Sonny Red's autopsy revealed that he'd been shot 3 times by 2 different shooters, and the single shot above his left ear was the clear signature of a mob execution. Sonny Red's bloated corpse supported the information that Pistone was getting from his captain. But the bodies of the 2 other mobsters were still nowhere to be found.
Joe Pistone has gotten tape-recorded evidence talking about the murders and the cleanup. But still, they're nowhere near coming up with the inside story of who was involved, who did it, and how they pulled it off.
Pistone discovered from Black that he had originally been considered to be in on the triple murders, but Messina turned down the idea.
He said, I wanted to bring you on the hit. He said, because I'm going to propose you for membership, and it would have looked good with all the other captains. He said, but Joey Messina nixed it.
Since this was a critical moment in Messina's grab for power, he wanted only his most trusted allies at the scene. Instead, after the triple murders, Pistone was asked to kill a 4th Mafia member, Bruno, the son of one of the murdered mobsters.
I'm giving you a contract on Bruno. Why don't you look for him, kill him.
This was a major coup for Pistone and the FBI. No agent had ever gotten this close to becoming a true soldier in the mob. FBI agents aren't supposed to commit murder. So an elaborate plan was hatched. Agents would grab Bruno, fake the murder, and then put the intended victim into hiding. But while they were searching for the mobster's son, Pistone's FBI handlers were getting increasingly concerned over their agent's safety, fearing a new wave of violence following the triple murders.
They don't tell you they're going to whack you. It just happens.
They were afraid that Pistone was now a target because of his affiliation with Black and Messina.
It's a dicey situation when you're in this type of undercover operation, because your first thought is you got to preserve yourself. You know, you got to worry about your own security, because nobody else has done it. In a situation where it's me or the other guy, it's going to be the other guy. At this time, because there's a war going on, everybody's carrying a gun, all the wise guys, the FBI decides to shut the operation down. So I talked to the supervisor and also my good friend, come on, let this thing go till I get made, and he says, no way. He says, I'm not letting this thing go till you get made, because if you get whacked, then it's on me,
Pistone's handlers were worried about a backlash of violence, but he was able to convince them to let him stay despite the risks.
So, from May, June, July, we're just doing what we're doing, looking for Bruno to whack him, and, continuing the gambling operations, continuing, we had a little drug trade going on, continuing all the illegal activities we were involved in.
But still, no one could find the man they wanted to pretend to kill. And with so many elements unresolved, the FBI felt that the level of danger was now simply too high for Pistone. So on July 26, 1981, just over 2 months after the May hits, the FBI stopped the operation. But they still hadn't found the 2 missing victims of the triple murder or a link to Messina. Joe Pistone's 5 years undercover were over. He'd stayed in longer than any other FBI agent before him. 2 days later, the FBI visited the man who had been closest to Pistone.
The day that the FBI knocked on the door and told them, you know that guy Donnie Brasco who was hanging out with you? Well, he's not a wise guy. He's an FBI agent. Sonny Black was devastated. Minutes later, the FBI saw him up on the roof talking to his pigeons.
And his choice was to stay and face the consequences.
Sonny Black was killed soon after the truth about his friend came out.
Sonny Black made a choice that he was not going to roll, he was not going to flip, he was not going to become a turncoat. He hoped he would be able to talk the Bonanno family out of whacking him. He failed in that endeavor. He was killed. About a year later, his body was found in a swamp in Staten Island.
The reason they went to him because we knew that chances are he was going to get killed, so Bureau would protect him and save his life if he would agree to become an informant.
His corpse was found with both hands severed. The message from the Mafia was clear. Shaking hands with and vouching for an FBI agent would get you killed. His friend's decision still resonates with Pistone after all these years.
He proved to me that he was a stone gangster by knowing that he was going to get killed and going to this sit-down and getting killed. I mean, to me it says a lot about Sonny as a person, when you know the world, you know their world.
The triple murders of 1981 still baffle the FBI 20 years after the fact, even as the dig for the bodies in the gangland graveyard continued. At the time of the murders, mobster Joe Messina was on his way to the top of the Bonanno crime family. But there was a problem. The FBI's undercover work had left the Mafia family in disarray.
The penetration of the Bonanno family by Joe Pistone as Donnie Brasco was a disgrace for the Bonannos. The other 4 families tended to look down on them because they allowed themselves to be hoodwinked by the government.
And to make matters worse, Pistone began testifying about all of the criminal activities he had uncovered. Indictments and convictions on racketeering, extortion, loan sharking, illegal gambling, and murder came rolling in. With the help of Pistone's testimony, the FBI was able to indict Messina on charges that included the triple murders. He was convicted on racketeering charges and sentenced to 10 years in prison. But to everyone's surprise, Messina was acquitted of the murder charges.
Well, the first trial that had Joey on, he skated on it. I don't know why the jury didn't convict him. I mean, why didn't the jury convict O.J. Simpson? Why didn't they convict this singer, Michael Jackson? Who knows what goes through a jury's mind?
Still, Messina was in jail, and his family was reeling in the aftermath of the infiltration by the undercover agent, Joe Pistone. The FBI wasn't taking them seriously anymore, and only a small group of agents within the FBI kept an eye on them. One of that group was Special Agent Jack Stubing.
The Bonannos began to lose steam within the organized crime community. The fact that they were not respected by the other four families allowed law enforcement to redirect some of its resources to address the crime problem that was posed by the other four families. And that allowed the Bonannos to thrive like cockroaches in the dark.
The lack of attention would soon prove costly. With neither the FBI nor the Mafia paying the Bonannos much attention, Massino was quietly consolidating his power from prison. He was freed in 1992 and immediately assumed leadership of the family. 11 years after he made his move for power and eliminated his three main rivals, he was finally in control. The new Bonanno boss ran the family from a restaurant near his home.
We're in Maspeth, Queens, Joe Massino country, here at the Casablanca. His pride and joy and the base of operations during the mid-1990s after he took control of the Bonanno crime family. And it became not only his base of operations for mob stuff, but also where he hung out. It was the kind of place that he enjoyed. It was his pride and joy. All of his top gangsters were required to come and patronize his establishment.
The family was riding high. Money was pouring in. And Massino was sitting pretty. But he was very careful about how he conducted business.
Massino was very surveillance conscious. The fact that Joe Pistone infiltrated the Bonanno crime family and came close to bringing him down certainly was in the back of Joe Massino's mind.
Jack Stubing realized that the FBI needed to do something different. In an extraordinary first step, he introduced himself to Massino.
Well, in 1995, I went to visit Massino and I had a conversation with him. We played a little game. I pretended that he was no longer involved in organized crime, and he pretended that he believed that I believed that. And what I found out about Massino as a result of that conversation was that he was a real student of FBI investigative techniques. He mentioned surveillances, he talked about the descriptions of cars we were using. He even remembered partial license plates, and some of these surveillances had taken place years before our conversation. And I was on some of those surveillances, so I knew he knew what he was talking about. And it convinced me that the methods that we had used were not necessarily going to be successful against Massino.
Stubing realized that to break Massino, the FBI would have to come up with a new way to get him.
You may intimidate witnesses, or maybe you can kill informants, but organized crime exists for the purpose of making money through illegal means. That money's got to come into the organization and it's got to flow back out, and that's going to leave footprints somewhere in the financial system.
Stubing wanted to find the proceeds of crime. He believed that old financial records held critical evidence that should lead them back to Massino.
I knew that the only way that we were going to be able to do that kind of a financial investigation is to get accountants that were well-versed in those techniques, and specifically forensic accountants, people that could dig through these financial records and look for evidence of a crime.
In 1999, Stubing finally got his wish. 2 new, recently graduated FBI agents were assigned to the case. Both were accountants.
I remember the first time I saw Jeff go through a box of documents, and he would just pull out documents and randomly say, oh, this is evidence of structuring, this is evidence of this is evidence of that. And he was like a kid in a candy store. He instantly recognize things for what they were.
Forensic accounting makes use of financial records much in the same way as forensic anthropology makes use of bones. Applied to the mob, forensic accounting could uncover evidence of past crimes like fraud, money laundering, and extortion. A United States prosecutor helped the team subpoena records.
There were boxes and boxes and boxes of documents. You know, you'd get computer printouts and old checks and bank statements and credit card statements and back tax records. And each new round of subpoenaed documents would generate another round of subpoenas.
The FBI estimated that they ultimately brought in tens of thousands of documents. Nearly 2 years into the investigation, agents got their first big break.
The agents found 3 checks from Diane Vitale to Barry Weinberg and 3 checks from Josephine Messino to Barry Weinberg. And they said, "Who is this guy?"
Some of the key players were known to the FBI. Diana Vitale was married to the underboss of the family, Sal Vitale.
Yeah, he's Joe Messino's right-hand man. He's his brother-in-law. He's his number 2 guy in the crime family. He's the guy who helps Joe make major decisions, and he's the guy who Joe trusts to take care of important things that have to be done.
And his sister was Josephine Messino, the wife of the boss. At the time, it was a close-knit family. The person they didn't know was Barry Weinberg. But they found it suspicious that the wives of the 2 most powerful men in the Bonanno crime family were writing checks to him. So they put him under surveillance and did a background check.
Barry Weinberg was involved in the parking lot industry in New York City. He made a great deal of money buying and selling parking lot leases.
He was also having daily meetings with members of the Bonanno crime family in Little Italy. And agents soon learned that Weinberg was in trouble with the taxman.
Mr. Barry Weinberg?
Yes?
I have to speak to you, sir.
He had failed to file income tax returns for years and owed millions of dollars to the government.
Right to remain silent. Anything you say can
With that information in hand, the FBI arrested Weinberg on January the 9th, 2001.
Provided for you. Do you understand these rights I've read you?
Weinberg was brought to FBI headquarters in Manhattan for interrogation.
What's going on?
Mr. Weinberg, do you recognize that check?
Yeah.
Is there something you'd like to tell us?
Within minutes, Weinberg agreed to cooperate. The FBI discovered that his relationship with the Mafia was strictly one-sided.
We learned Barry Weinberg was forced to sell parts of his interests in these parking lots to Josephine Messino and Diane Vitale at a radically reduced price.
Weinberg was being extorted, and it was all being handled through the women of the Bonanno family.
The men had put them out front. The men were hiding behind their skirts, and the women were in the trick box. So we would have a solid case against them and a less solid case against the men.
But since Weinberg was so willing to cooperate, the agents felt they could bypass the women and go directly after the men through him. He even agreed to wear a wire.
We need this. This is absolutely crucial.
And they got him suited up and back out on the street within hours of his arrest.
Doing it right?
Yeah, doing the right thing.
It's not a good feeling. It's not a comfortable feeling because, you know, you're not going to hesitate killing you right there if you're an informant when they find the wire. So it's not comfortable. But that's how you gather the evidence to get an indictment and hopefully a conviction in court.
Yeah, just remember, Stick to the plan, you'll be in and out.
Stick to the plan.
Fortunately, Weinberg's personality was well suited to the task.
You know, it was his way to be nervous anyway, so that the fact that he was hyperactive wasn't suspicious because that's the way he was. He went back to Donico for his regular meeting that day. You know, we wanted to prevent him having second thoughts, and the fact that he wired up, you know, it's like a commitment.
For nearly a year, Weinberg stayed wired and recorded more than 80 conversations with members and associates of the Bonannos. The tapes revealed how they were extorting him, and they were heard talking about other crimes, past and present.
I look all right?
You're looking fantastic.
The FBI's plan to go after Massino through the family's financial record seemed to be
Be
working.
myself, right? Just be myself.
It's worked every time.
Okay, give me, I could do it. I could do it. I got this all the time.
Yep.
In return for his cooperation, Weinberg was never prosecuted for tax evasion and was placed in witness protection.
It's pretty good. All right, job well done. The tape is good. We're done.
Good?
We're done.
We're done.
But only a year after he finished his work with the FBI, he died of cancer.
It was actually quite sad that he didn't live to see what he'd begun, but, you know, they say there are two things you can't avoid, death and taxes, and at least Barry got 50%. He avoided paying those taxes.
In October of 2002, the FBI started bringing in members of the Bonannos one by one. Agents were now taking aim at Massino's underlings, but their main goal never wavered. They wanted the boss, and they wanted to solve the event that got him going, the triple murders of long ago. The most important captain that the agents interrogated was Frank Copa. He was a high-ranking member of the family who made millions for Massino through what's called pump and dump schemes.
People who were involved in the stock market would artificially pump the value of the stock up, and then when the time was right, the people who were in the know would sell all their shares and the price of the stock would collapse, so that would be the dump part.
Frank Copa was a very good moneymaker for the mob. Although he had never been convicted of a violent, a traditional organized crime, he knew where the bodies were buried.
Copa was already in prison serving time on racketeering charges. The FBI hoped new extortion charges stemming from the Weinberg investigation would convince him to cooperate.
We have list after list of evidence against you. Names, people that...
Copa by that time was, I believe, in his early 60s, and he had many illnesses that he felt that he was going to, if he got another 6 years tacked on, he was going to die in prison, and he did not want to die in prison.
All right, okay, I'll do it.
Frank Copa broke. His decision to turn against his family was another critical event for the FBI and a monumental betrayal for the Bonannos.
This was the first time ever that a made member of the Bonanno family at any level cooperated with the government.
What started with the discovery of a few handwritten checks had now grown into a full-scale assault on the Bonanno family. The FBI was inching ever closer to the triple murders and, as a result, to the infamous mob boss, Joe Massino himself. The FBI were determined to bring down Joe Massino, now the boss of the revitalized and powerful Bonanno crime family. His bloody rise to power had begun with the still unsolved executions of 1981.
Joe Massino was a tough guy. He was a killer. He was a mafia boss. He certainly is not someone who you would want to tangle with if you could get away with it, you know, if you didn't have to.
But the foundation on which Joe Massino had built his empire was beginning to crumble. The FBI had gotten to Frank Copa, and as word spread, more mobsters began to talk.
Once he makes a deal,
there's an avalanche of cooperating witnesses from the Bonanno crime family. It took more than 40 years for a member of the Bonanno crime family to become a defector and cooperate with the government. But once the first one came, they came in droves.
The defections reached all the way up the chain of command to the family's underboss, Sal Vitali. He was Massino's second in command and his brother-in-law. The tight-knit Bonanno family was unraveling. Vitali implicated Massino in the triple murders of 1981 that had been critical to his rise to power. On January the 9th, 2003, 2 years to the day after the arrest of Barry Weinberg, Joseph Massino was arrested. Among the charges were the premeditated murders of Sonny Red, Big Trin, and Phil Lucky.
To kill 3 people and be prepared to dispose of the bodies is not something you can think of and plan overnight. A lot of planning went into this caper.
Finally, what happened the night of the 1981 triple murders came out in testimony from the witness box, giving a chilling insight into how the mafia plans and commits murder.
This was a feud over power. Who was going to control the family that they had been part of all these years?
According to Vitali's direct court testimony, there were 4 gunmen in all. Himself, along with 3 others, who'd been brought in from the Canadian faction of the family for added secrecy.
Philly Lucky, Sonny Red, and Big Trin gotta go down. Sally, you got your crew working also.
The plan was to lure the victims to a meeting on neutral ground, in the basement of a social club in Brooklyn.
I mean, the social club proper is up on the 2nd floor, and right behind these doors is where the 3 captains were blown away.
In court, his men revealed that Massino had set a trap by calling for a sit-down to resolve conflicts. The Mafia Code dictated that mobsters had to attend these meetings and had to come unarmed. But Massino wasn't playing by normal rules. Vitali recalled that once all 3 rivals entered the basement, there would be a signal to the gunman. This was the plan as described in court.
George, when you see Sonny Red come in, you're gonna signal like this with your hand through your hair. Like that. That's the cue. Vito, you come out first.
On the street, Sonny Black was in charge of the lookout crew.
We were told to have ski masks that we'd put on in the closet and coat room, and before we came out to put the ski masks on. We left the door open a smidge to look out.
Just as planned, the 3 captains arrived.
We sat there waiting for the doorbell to ring. We seen Trini enter, Phil Lucky.
Hey, Sonny. It's good to see you.
Sonny Red.
Thanks for coming.
When Sonny walked in, he immediately linked arms with Joe Massino, figuring, I'll be so close to him that nothing bad could happen to me. He was obviously dead wrong. As soon as he got in, George from Canada ran his fingers through his hair. That was a signal for the 3 guys who were hiding in the closet to jump out and start shooting.
Everybody froze except Big Trin, who charged the shooters. Then Phil Lucky was mowed down. Finally, Sonny Red was hit. Sal, who had not fired a shot, described the bloody plot's end.
I seen George pull out a gun and shoot him on the left side of the head. By that time, it was all over.
Big Trin, Philly Lucky, and Sonny Red were blown away. All of a sudden, there were 3 less Bonanno family skippers, and Joe Massino was in control of the most powerful faction of the Bonanno crime family.
The bloodbath was over. Massino's elaborate murder plot had gone off without a hitch. Another crew descended on the gory scene for the cleanup. Having so many different men involved in the triple murders was part of Massino's plan.
They were placed by the door waiting for Big Louie to take the truck into position to take the 3 bodies and put them in the van.
The van left the Brooklyn murder scene, destined for the gangland graveyard and the disposal of the 3 dead men.
In 1981, it was a great idea having so many guys, made them bond together, and it gave Joe a little bit of security in that none of them was going to end up talking about it because they were all involved in a triple homicide. 20 years later, it turned out not to be such a smart idea. Pretty much Messino's entire crew took the witness stand and testified, he did it, he did it, he did it, he did it, he did it.
It had taken 20 long years, but the FBI had finally convinced Messino's crew to turn against him. On July the 30th, 2004, Joseph Messino was convicted of murder. But the story did not end there. Facing certain life in prison and the possibility of the death penalty, Messino decided to cooperate with the FBI. Like so many of his subordinates before him, he betrayed the sacred mafia code of silence. This was the first time in the nearly 100-year history of the New York Mafia that a mob boss, the highest-ranking member of a crime family, had ever turned informant. And the first thing he revealed was the one piece of information that had not yet come up at trial. It was he who told the FBI where the bodies were buried. The mastermind of the massacre directed agents to search for the 2 missing men at the very same location where Sonny Red's body had been found more than 2 decades before. The FBI retrieved not only most of 2 bodies, but also personal effects, including a leather jacket, a crucifix, and a watch, all worn the night of the murders. The items were identified by relatives of the murdered men. Family members also agreed to provide blood samples so the FBI could compare their DNA with the DNA from the bones. 2 positive matches came in, leaving no doubt that Big Trin and Phil Lucky had indeed ended up in the gangland graveyard. It took more than 20 years and 3 generations of FBI agents to finally bring down Joseph Messino, the Don of the Bonannos, and solve the mystery of the 1981 triple murders. During that time, Messino rose, fell, and rose again. But in the end, the FBI got him to work for them. And the once powerful mob boss became what some might call an effing rat.
Up next,